Hi everybody. So as promised, I wanted to make a video about the solo and talk about a few different things that might help you, including everybody's favorite thing, the last two measures in the first section and the second section. So before we get to talking about that, I wanted to say a little bit about the opportunity that you have in this piece for using some rotation of your hand to make life easier for you. Now, I know it's very tempting to want to play the piano just with your fingers and to go play everything with a lot of finger motion. And if you play just like you're typing on a keyboard, and if you play on a keyboard that doesn't have weighted keys, it can be really easy to fall into this because they're really light. And then you go and play on an actual piano and it gets more difficult. So when we play on an actual piano, you want to almost feel that the weight of your arm and your hand is doing the work a lot more than any individual motion of the fingers. Because if you get too used to doing that, none of you will really, I hope, run into any trouble with this. But if you're a professional pianist and you spend hours practicing piano every day and you only were using this, that's a good recipe for getting tendinitis. So the other thing is when you use this rotation and the weight, it makes it easier to play and also I think produces a better sound. So even at the beginning, I'm kind of rotating my wrist up for that octave. And then each of these are rotations and I'm kind of going from down. I don't know how well you can see that in this view, but I'm kind of rotating from in to out, back to in. Instead of... Now, you can hopefully hear the difference that when I play, it automatically gives me a little bit more phrasing and makes the notes more connected. So for those of you that already felt reasonably confident with knowing the notes, that might be a little bit of polish that you can add, kind of up your piano technique. But let's get on to talking about the favorite subject of everybody, the last two measures. So the big issue here seems to be going from this third to the dominant 7th chord on E, and then that subsequent resolution to A minor, but mostly this jump. Now, first of all, if you look at the music in measure 6, it says to use 2 and 4 on C and E. And actually, the longer I look at it, the more I disagree with that choice of fingering. I really think it should be 1 and 3, which allows you to keep pretty much the same hand position from the beginning. All the way up to right there. And then here, when you need to go up to D and F, I would reach over with your thumb. Your second finger is already on D. And then, when you move down, then this third here is also present. You have a third in the top voice, and you're going to play it with the same fingers. So all you have to do is keep the same hand shape in between the D and F and the B and D, and then just find E on the bottom. So usually if we're moving, I like to try and keep as much constant as you can. If you can keep something constant like your hand shape while you're moving to know that this is going to stay constant, then that makes it a lot easier than trying to readjust your hand shape and find all 3 notes over again from scratch, because that's particularly difficult. But in this piece, you don't really need to do that. Just so long as you think about putting your thumb on D, and then those 2 fingers will be right in position, fall right there. All I have to do is find E. Now I know in some ways I'm making it look a little bit easier than it might be. It takes some practice to get used to doing that. But once you get used to that, it becomes pretty automatic. I would practice first what I'm doing here, just that upper third, and then add the E on the bottom, and then add the right hand. Now, there's one other little item that you can add if you want to add some final polish to your piece, and that is in measure 9, right after the repeat. When it changes, it's forte, and we're suddenly in the major mode. So when you go to that, make sure that you kind of have a change in the color there, or the mood of the piece. To reflect that change to major, and then change again, back to minor. So, the last thing I want to talk about is the tempo. Some of you were apologizing for playing too slow, feeling like you played too slow. And honestly, this piece is only Allegretto. Doesn't need to be presto, doesn't need to be... Doesn't need to be like that. Really, I would much prefer that you take it at even more on the moderato side, but still have a good sense of steadiness of beat and getting all the notes in and not feeling rushed. Because, let me tell you, there is one thing that really comes through in people's performances. That's rushing. For whatever reason, it seems like rushing imparts a stamp on people's musical performances that tends to override everything else going on. So, I've seen a lot of good performances, not necessarily in watching the videos from you, but just in general. A lot of what were otherwise good performances that have been marred by places where the performer just rushed because they were afraid or nervous or anxious, or they just let their feelings get the best of them and they started rushing. Don't let that be you. So one of the other things that I've said is, if you're struggling to find the tempo at the beginning of the piece, because it can be very easy to start this piece faster than you might necessarily want to play, is think about how fast you want to play the most difficult part. So at the beginning, think about how fast you want to play these two measures, get that in your head, get that rhythm going, and then try and start the beginning at that tempo. I hope that helped, and until next time.